Hey guys, Chris Fix here, and today I'm going to show you the entire process of how to replace a hybrid battery. And in this case, we're going to be working on my Generation 3 Prius. So this video will cover from 2010 to 2015, and this is my 2013 Prius I just purchased. I found it on Auto Tempest for $2,700 because, well, it has a bad hybrid battery, and hopefully when we're done with this, the car will be fixed, and it'll be worth about $8,000, leaving us room for a healthy profit. Now these Generation 3 Priuses are getting up there in age and mileage, and that's causing these batteries to fail, and when they do fail, that is very expensive. And just to give you an idea, I got a quote from a local dealership to replace the hybrid battery, and it would cost $4,600, so we're talking a lot of money here. So instead, we're going to be installing an aftermarket battery pack from Electron Automotive. This is about $2,200, saving us $1,000 over OEM. Plus, we're going to be doing this with common hand tools ourselves, saving us $1,000 in labor, so over $2,000 saved by doing this ourselves. And the best thing is, this is an upgraded battery pack. So this battery pack has more power than OEM, and also when you're using the regenerative braking, this charges up quicker. Plus, we have a 3-year 45,000 mile warranty versus the OEM 1-year 12,000 mile warranty. Now, the most important thing when getting an aftermarket battery pack is making sure you get a high quality one, and I've actually used this company before. Check this out. This right here is the Prius I replaced the hybrid battery on over 4 years ago. I made a video on it. It's a Gen 2 Prius, so 2004 to 2009, just in case you guys had this year Prius. I'll put a link in the description to that video below. And the reason why I asked the owner to bring the car by real quick is because the proof is in the pudding. This is a daily driver for over 4 years, no hybrid battery issues. It's been fixed, and this car is a great example of that. So I've used this company before with good results, and they have a full service shop out in California, which is why I'm comfortable recommending them to you guys. So I want to thank them for supporting the video and making these high quality battery packs that don't break the bank for a bunch of different hybrid cars. That way we could fix these cars instead of junking them. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So all these tools and products I use in this video will be linked down in the description. That way you could easily find it. Let's grab our safety glasses and get them on, and let's go get started. Now before you go buy an expensive battery pack, let me show you real quick how to tell if your battery's bad. Now the good thing about the Prius is it clearly lets you know that the battery is bad. So if we go to start her up and take a look at the dashboard, you can see it comes up right away to check the hybrid system. Additionally, you'll notice that the fuel economy will go down. Right now I'm only getting about 30 miles a gallon, but with the new battery, I bet we could get over 60. And we'll test out that bet at the end of the video. And finally, the best for sure way to know that you have a bad battery is to plug in an OBD2 scanner like this. That way we could scan the computer. So under the steering wheel, you could plug in the scanner into this port right here. And since this car is already turned on, just open up the app on the phone and scan the codes. And here are the results of the scan. If we look down at the permanent codes, we have P0A80, that says to replace the hybrid battery, P3011 saying block 1 is weak, and P3013 saying block 3 is weak. So if you see codes like this, you could be pretty confident that your battery needs to be replaced. So now we know for sure the hybrid battery is bad. Let's shut the engine off and let's replace it. Now the hybrid battery is located in the rear of the car, so we're going to be working out of the trunk. So let's pop that open, and just to give you an idea, the hybrid battery is located right about here. So let me show you how to easily get to it. First, let's remove the trunk liner, then we can remove the floor lid, followed by the cargo tray. And just like that, you could already see our hybrid battery right here. Now, we do have to remove a couple of other things to get to the full battery, but before we do anything else, once I could see this orange plug, this is the safety plug, I like to remove it. So all you have to do to remove it, pull that out, turn the lever, and that comes right out just like that. This safety plug kills the voltage when it's removed, so now the battery is safe to work on. That's why I like to remove it right away. So with that removed, now let's go and disconnect the 12-volt battery. So pop this tray out, as well as this little side panel to get access to the battery. Now I'm using a 10mm wrench to loosen up the negative cable, and a ratcheting wrench works great here. And with this loose, we could disconnect it from the battery and tuck it away so it won't touch the negative terminal. So with our battery disconnected, now we could come to the other side and remove these plastic trim pieces. So remove the lid, and then there's a plastic nut you could unscrew by hand, and then this tray comes right out. With that out, now let's head over to the back seats and remove the privacy shade. This just pops out. Good. And then fold down both rear seats. And that quickly, we almost have access to our battery. There are only 2 pieces left that we need to remove. We have this interior piece right here, which we'll get our fingers under and pop up. But before we do that, there is a hidden bolt right about here. I'll show you how to get that out. And then we have our side interior piece, which we also want to remove so we could get to the side of the battery. So let's get this top piece off first. And to do that, come around to the passenger side here, pop that door open, and let me show you where that hidden bolt is right here. And this is a 10mm bolt, so let's break this loose and then loosen it the rest of the way by hand. Good. So now with our rear bolt removed, we could come back around to the rear of the car and we could pop this plastic trim piece out. Now the trick here is to get your fingers under the plastic, and you want one good strong pull. Just like that. Perfect. So now you could clearly see the battery, and you could also see why I'm saying we should remove this side panel here. It gets in the way. So to remove this side panel, we're gonna sneak around to the passenger side, and we need to remove this right here. And to do that, it's gonna be hard to see, but you have to press down on this seat cushion, and there is a bolt down there that you need to remove. Now this is a 12mm, so get a socket on there with an extension, break it loose, and carefully remove it the rest of the way so you don't drop it behind the seat. Good. So now what we're gonna do to remove this piece right here with the vent, we're gonna lift upwards like this, and then we're gonna pull this part at the top outwards like that, and this comes right out. So with the trim piece removed, you could see we have a filter right here. This is very important. If you have a Prius, check to see if you have this filter. Not every Prius has this filter, and if you don't, all this stuff that got caught up here will end up going into your electric fan, and it could cause your battery to overheat. If your battery overheats, it could go bad. That's expensive. This is cheap. So if you have a Prius, even if your battery's not bad, make sure you check and see if you have a filter. They didn't all come with filters. If you don't have a filter, I'll put a link in the description to where you could find one. It's inexpensive and could save you a ton of money because you don't want your battery getting hot. And if you do have a filter already, it's worth checking to make sure it's not clogged up like this one. That could also cause your battery to run hot. So let's clean it. Now on the side of the filter is a little tab. So just pull the housing off the tab, and then you could carefully pry the filter out, making sure you don't shake the dust off the filter. Now to clean the filter, just use some running water, and it would actually be better if I flip this around and hit it from the other side. And now you can see all the dust is coming right off, no problem. And once this is clean, just give it a good shake to get all the water off, and we're ready to install our clean filter. So just reinstall it the same way it came out. And remember, on the side of the housing there is a hole. Just get that filter tab into the hole, and now the clean filter is installed. Beautiful. So with that filter nice and clean, we could come around to the back, and now we could remove our side trim piece. And to get that off, first we need to pop off this trim piece. So with 2 hands, give it one big pull. Beautiful. And now we could remove our side panel, and there are 4 fasteners holding this in. We have one right down here, we have one right there, we have one at the seat belt, and we have one right there. So let's get those removed. So let's start at the tie down right here and loosen this 10mm bolt and remove it the rest of the way by hand. Then right above that is the cargo net tie down, which could be removed with a Phillips head screwdriver. And with that removed, let's remove the fastener over here under the seatbelt. And just get a small flathead screwdriver into the hole here and pry it out like so. And now this just comes right out. And finally, the last fastener is this tie down right here. So break this 10mm bolt loose. Good, and then we can loosen it up the rest of the way and remove it. Beautiful. And with all 4 fasteners removed, now we can pop this panel out, and we're gonna start popping it out from this side right here. So now we just have to peel back this weather stripping and just set it off to the side. And that leaves us a little gap here we could work our fingers behind. And you just wanna get your finger right on the plastic clip and pop it out. So that's the plastic clip right there I was telling you to get your fingers on, so you're pulling on the actual plastic and not on this material, because you could rip it off. You could actually see the glue from another clip that's supposed to be right there. Somebody pulled on this and ripped that clip off. I actually saw that clip earlier, and you could see somebody already has been in here. I also noticed on the battery there is a sticker or decal or something, or tape, whatever this is, that's not normally there from the factory. So I think somebody might have been inside this battery already. I'm not concerned because we're replacing all the internals. So we're gonna have basically a brand new battery with new cells. But I'm curious to see what's inside, so let's finish up removing this side panel. Now just work your way along the top of this panel, popping it out as you go. For the seatbelt, you can lift this up and the seatbelt slides right out. And now this panel could come out completely. And with that removed, now we have plenty of room to get to the battery and disconnect it. But before we remove the battery, I want to epoxy this plastic piece back onto our interior trim piece. That way we give our epoxy time to cure, and by the time we have to install this, it'll be good to go. So I'm using a strong 2-part epoxy, and always use a non-porous surface to mix this in. Then you just push out the amount you need, like that. and mix it together real quick until it's one uniform color, which takes about 10 seconds at most. Now we want to get this on here right away because this hardens pretty quickly. So work the epoxy into the material and spread it out like so. And you can make out the original orientation of the clip on the panel. So let me get this in the same position and then push it into place. And finally, clamp this down to hold it tight against the material for a good strong cure. So as we let that cure, let's go back over to the car and disconnect the hybrid battery, and we'll start right on this side. So let's remove this black vent, and to do that, we need to remove this clip right here. So get your panel clip pliers and work it under the clip, and then pry up until it pops out. Good, and now we can remove the vent from the battery. Next, we have this white plastic piece that needs to be removed, and there's a white clip right here. So push the plastic off the clip, and then there's another clip down here, so just give this a good yank, and it'll come right off. Good, so now we have 5 10mm nuts that we need to remove from this cover. So let's remove these 2 nuts right here, and then the last 3 are deep in here, so you're gonna need to use an extension to loosen them. And to remove the nut all the way down here, a stick magnet makes this really easy. So loosen the nut on the other side and use the stick magnet to easily remove it. And finally, there's one last nut right here, so let's remove that. And all that's left is this right here. And this orange fastener is specially designed to keep you safe. It cannot be removed without a special tool. I'll show you that in a second. The reason being is underneath this cover are exposed wires. So they don't want you opening up this cover without your safety plug removed. Remember, this is what we removed in the beginning of the video. That way it kills all the voltage to the battery. And if you look at the end of the safety plug right there, you can see there's a peg. Well, that peg fits right into that hole. That way we can remove this safety fastener. So you can see it fits in just like that. Then you give it about a quarter of a turn and it pops open, and then you can remove that fastener. So that's a really good design to make sure that the safety plug is removed before you remove this cover. And now's probably a good time for me to explain how I remember where to put all these different fasteners, the nuts, the bolts, when I go to reinstall them, because there's a bunch. This is just the beginning and we already have a bunch. Well, the easiest way is to get a Ziploc bag with a note card in it and just label everything. You can see I have 5 10mm nuts and 1 orange fastener, and then I'll put it right in this bag. And then now I know for sure when I go to reinstall everything where this goes. It just makes the whole process foolproof. So now we can remove our cover, and that gives us access to our battery junction box, which is all the electronics for our battery. And the only thing that we need to touch in here right now are these 2 wires. So these 2 wires take the high voltage from our battery and bring it to the inverter, which is in the engine bay. And then that powers the electric motor. Now normally these 2 wires have a lot of voltage going through them, but that's only when the car is on and when our safety plug is plugged in. You can see with the safety plug removed, it opens the circuit here, so there's no voltage flowing through any of this. So this is a very safe design. And just in case you want a little bit of extra peace of mind to make sure there's no voltage going through these wires before you touch them, you could grab your multimeter and you could take your negative lead right here, touch it to the negative side. You could take your positive lead right here, touch it to the positive side, and you could see there are no volts at all running through this system. So we are safe to disconnect these 2 wires. So break both of these 10mm nuts loose with the ratchet. Then we could remove both of these the rest of the way by hand. And then we could remove the wires. And don't worry about the ends here. They could touch metal without any problem since there's no power to them. So tuck them out of the way like that, and then get these 2 nuts back on the studs, that way we don't lose them. So with our high voltage wires disconnected and tucked off to the side, next we want to remove this black ductwork that connects to our fan here. That way it's easier to remove the battery. There's also a couple wires that go over here that we need to pop off and set off to the side. And then we have some wires with pigtails that we could disconnect, and then we're able to remove our battery. Now to remove this ducting, you need to pop off this clip right here. So get in there and pry it apart, and then this comes right out like that. Next, we have 2 retaining clips right here. So let's pop these out, and this just holds the wiring to the case. And the next clip right here has a little tab that you pry outwards, and then that clip could slide right off like that. And finally, there's one more clip down here holding in this wire, and the easiest way to remove this is to grab a needle nose pliers and just squeeze the 2 ends of the clip, and that makes it pop out a lot easier. So with these wires removed from the case, now let's disconnect them from the connectors. And all you need to do is press in this little tab and pull it right out. Same with the connector here, and this last connector here. Good. So with those wires removed, all that's holding this battery in are 6 bolts, and we could quickly remove them. There's 2 in the front, there's 1 right there, and there's 1 right there. There's 2 in this corner, and then there's 2 in that corner. So let's get these bolts removed and get this battery out. So all of these are 12mm bolts, and they're in there pretty good, so you're gonna need a little more leverage. There we go. So break it loose, and then you could remove it the rest of the way by hand. Then the next bolt is right here, so break that loose, and now we can remove it the rest of the way by hand. Now the next 2 bolts are in the back corner here, And these are the 2 bolts we need to remove, and if you look here, this one also holds the rear seat down, and the bolt is different than that one, so just keep that in mind for when we go and reinstall these later on. And again, these are both 12mm bolts, so remove them all the way. And you can see the shorter one is the one that goes into the back seat bracket right down here. So with these 2 bolts removed, let's come over to the other corner and get these last 2 bolts removed. Again, both of these are 12mm, and an extension makes it easier to get down here. And to remove them, a stick magnet works wonders because there isn't a lot of room to get your hands down here. Now we have our last bolt right here. Let's get that bolt out. Good. Now the battery is completely disconnected, so let's remove it, and I'm going to show you how to do this with just one person. First, let's get all 6 of those bolts we just removed and put them in a labeled bag. I'm calling these the battery hold down bolts. Good, and a little trick is to put some cardboard down, that way it's easy to slide the battery out. So I'll start on the fan side of the battery and pull it out a little bit, then go to the other side and pull it out a little more. Now if you have a friend around, this is where they could help you lift this 90-pound battery. But as you can see, you could do this on your own if you really need to. Alright, so with our old battery removed, now we just need to remove this cover. Under here are all the old cells that we'll pull out and replace with our nice brand new cells. Once the new cells go back in, we'll wire it back up, we'll put the cover back on, and we could get this installed. Now real quick, I do want to mention they sell this entire battery pack with brand new cells pre-installed. That way you don't have to open it up and replace the cells yourself. It does cost more money, about $500 more, but it is an option just in case you're uncomfortable with digging into the battery and swapping out the cells. Now it's not difficult to do. I'm about to show you how to do it right now so you could save yourself that $500. So there are 4 nuts on this side of the case that need to be removed. All these are 10mm nuts, so remove them completely. Now real quick, something that I noticed that I want to mention, right here is a hole, and in this hole should be one of these orange safety fasteners, but in this case it isn't because I think somebody's been in this battery and they forgot to reinstall it. So in your battery, if it hasn't been touched, you will find one of these safety fasteners right here. You already know how to remove this, so just pop it out. Good, and with those 4 nuts removed, now we can move to the other side of the battery and remove the other 4 nuts. So that's 1, that's 2, 3, and 4. And now we can remove the cover. Okay, so with the cover removed, you could actually see each individual cell that makes up the entire hybrid battery. That's pretty cool. Now what we're gonna do next is remove the bus bars. So there's one on this side, and there is one on this side. So let me show you how to get those off. So just grab a small flathead screwdriver and just pry it at the top like that, and it should come right off. So work your way down the battery and remove all the covers. So with the covers removed, you can see each individual nut that holds the bus bar onto each individual battery cell, and we have to remove all of those. And if you have power tools, now's the time to use them because you could buzz off all these nuts really quickly with this. But I know not everybody has power tools, so I'm gonna be using good old common hand tools to show you could get it done with just this. So let's remove all 28 8mm nuts, and again, if you have power tools, use them because it'll make this job go much quicker. But as you can see, you can still get this job done with just a ratchet, no problem. So with all the nuts removed, you could put them in your used nut and bolt jar because this kit comes with brand new bolts that fit into the new batteries. So now let's pull the orange bus bars off the battery. So the bus bar is completely removed from this side of the battery. We could just let that sit like that for now. We're gonna remove that completely in a second. But first, let's remove the other bus bar real quick. So pry off all the bus bar covers to expose the nuts. And again, remove all 28 8mm nuts. And just to give you an idea, it does take about 7 minutes to do this by hand and only about a minute to do it with power tools. Off camera, I timed it because I was curious. So now we can remove the bus bars, and you can see this right here. This is the wiring for the safety plug, so just pop it out, and we're gonna reuse this on the new batteries. So with the bus bars removed from both sides of the battery, now we could take our safety plug wiring, the one that went right over here. We could just tuck this off to the side because we're gonna keep that connected. And then we wanna take our old bus bar wiring, this one, and we're gonna disconnect it from these 2 spots right here. So just use a small flathead screwdriver to push the tab in and pull the wire straight out. Same for the other one. Now we can open up the white wire holder and remove both of the orange wires. And then finally, we need to disconnect the orange connector at the bottom here. So depress the tab and pull it out. Perfect. And just like that, we've removed our high voltage bus bars. So make sure you save this because there's a wire on here we're gonna have to reinstall with the new battery. Now, the next thing we need to do is remove the temperature sensor for the battery. See, it connects into here and it goes up here. There is one right there. There is another one right there. And the final one is right there. And to remove the sensor, just pinch each side inwards and it comes right out. Now let's pop off the white wire holder and save this because we're gonna use these later. And then get the middle temperature sensor out along with the other wire holder. And finally, the last temperature sensor could be removed, again with its wire holder. Now right here, the harness is held in, so pop this out. And then this top wiring harness is in the way of the bottom one, which we need to remove. So let's remove the top one to get easier access. And now we can get the temperature sensor harness disconnected, like so. And then there's one more temperature sensor down here in the case, so pop it out with the pliers. Good, and now the whole temperature sensor harness could be removed. And with that, we have removed everything from our battery. So now we can remove this battery pack from our case. And to do that, we need to flip this case over. And remember, this is a 90-pound battery, so carefully flip this. Also, the edge is pretty sharp right here, so be careful. And just flip this over completely like this. Good. So with our case flipped over, now we need to remove this bracket right here, which is covering the bolts that hold the battery in. So remove all 8 fasteners holding this bracket in. And then we could remove the bracket. Beautiful, so now you can see we have access to all 14 bolts on this side as well as the 14 bolts on the other side, which holds our battery pack to the case, so let's remove those. So first grab a ratchet and a socket, and you want to crack each bolt loose because they're pretty tight on here. And I'll say it again, if you have power tools, use them so it's quicker. But I do have a trick to speed things along. Once you crack all these loose, grab your Phillips head screwdriver, and this will quickly loosen them the rest of the way. So unscrew all the bolts on this side, and don't lose them because we're going to need these to install into the new batteries. So with all the bolts on this side removed, now let's go to the other side of the battery and remove these bolts. So quickly unscrew these bolts as well. And now we can pull the battery case off the battery. So with our battery removed, now what we're gonna do is slide all these old cells out of this framework here and slide in our new cells. So let's get started. A trick here is to use a piece of wood to elevate this battery pack. And now we wanna crack these 12mm bolts loose back here. And these are usually a little tight. There we go. So crack all 4 of these bolts loose and then remove the bolts so we could take the end cap off. Good. So real quick, let me show you the difference between the new cylindrical cells and the old prismatic cells. So this prismatic cell technology is from the early 2000s, and the cylindrical cell technology is current. This is what we're using now. The good thing about the cylindrical cells is you could see the air gap in here. Because it's a cylinder, there is a large air gap, and that allows it to cool better, compared to this right here where the air gaps are smaller. Now, heat is the #1 killer of batteries, so if you could keep a battery cooler, it's gonna last longer, which is a big benefit. The other benefit is these cylindrical cells charge quicker with regenerative braking compared to the OEM, which is a nice upgrade. So now remove all the old cells, and the easiest way to do this is to slide them out of the bracket. Now we could take all the old cells and put them in a box to ship them back so we could get our core charge back. Next, the kit comes with 4 strands of protective wire loom, and this is included so that you could install this over each of the metal bars like this. The reason why you want to do this is to insulate these metal bars. That way it doesn't cause any shorts just in case there's chafing somewhere. Now at the end of the wire loom, it's a little sloppy, so grab some electrical tape and tape up the ends. You could also use heat shrink, but tape works fine. So just get a couple of wraps around the end of the loom, and now the end looks good and won't come apart. Alright, so we have our wire loom protector on all 4 of these posts. They're all nicely taped up, and we are good to go here. So let's go and install our brand new battery pack. Now this battery pack is labeled from 1 all the way to 14. We want to make sure that we keep it in that order because these batteries are matched and balanced with each other to give you the best possible battery life. So with that said, let's get these installed. So now we want to make sure we orient our bracket properly. You can see how we have 2 metal rods here. These are the wide ones, they're spread apart. We want the wider ones on the bottom because it's a nice big base. And don't forget to slide your wood under here, that way it's easier to slide the batteries in and easier to get that end piece on. Alright, so we're gonna start with battery 1, 2, and 3. And make sure you don't bang these around or drop them because you can damage the batteries. But get them in here and slide them to the end. Next we have batteries 4, 5, 6, and 7. Then we have batteries 8, 9, 10, and 11. And finally we have 12, 13, and 14. Okay, so our cells are installed. We just want to make sure they go from 1 all the way up to 14 in order. We also want to make sure it's centered. So you can see here's the 2 metal rods. We have this center line here. It's even through the whole battery pack, and it is. And then finally, you just want to make sure the end here is flush. So all the cells are flush against each other, and they are. So we're good to go. So the rib side goes up against the battery, and hand tighten all 4 of these bolts to sandwich the batteries together. And we want to torque each one of these down to 23 foot-pounds. So with the battery cells locked together, let's flip this over so the bolt holes on the batteries face up. And then we can get the battery case and get that on top. And you can see right here is the black air dam. that goes on the open end of the case, and the side without the black air dam goes on the computer side of the case. That way you know it's oriented correctly. Okay, so with our case on our battery, we just want to make sure that these bolt holes in the battery line up with the holes in the case, and you can see they do. If they don't line up perfectly, don't worry. You could shift the case around to get them to line up. You just want to be able to thread in a bolt, and then the rest of this will line up as you thread in each bolt. So this side looks good, and if we take a look at the other side, that looks good as well. So we're ready to install this and thread in all those bolts. Now, real quick, organization is key. It takes a few extra minutes. If you want to do this job without any problems at all, just take some baggies and write down where everything goes and keep it in order so you can't forget. That way, when you go to reinstall everything, you're not trying to figure out which nut or bolt goes where. It's all right here. So we have our case to battery bolts, all 28 of them. So let's get them installed. Now, I'm gonna quickly speed through tightening down each of these bolts because we don't need to waste time here, but just make sure you hand tighten them all like so. So with these bolts hand tightened, don't torque them down yet. Let's come to the other side and let's get these bolts in. And this side we wanna hand tighten as well. And now we wanna get our torque wrench and set it to 54 inch-pounds. Not foot-pounds, inch-pounds. So torque all these down, making sure you don't miss any, and also make sure, again, it's 54 inch-pounds, not foot-pounds, because if you use foot-pounds, it will strip these threads right out, and that'll damage the battery. With all the bolts torqued down, now we can get the bracket on here, and I have this baggie so I could stay organized and not forget where any of the fasteners go. And just get these hand tightened in there for now, and then we could torque them down to 66 inch-pounds. Good, and now we could flip this back over so we could finish up the install, and I cannot wait to get this back in the car. So next, what we want to do is connect our battery in series. So each of these cells is about 15.7 volts, but when we connect them all together, it's around 220 volts, and we'll do that using the included brand new bus bars, and they go right up against the battery, both on this side and on the other side. So just get the bus bar in place and screw in the new bolts that came with the kit. Now, when installing the bus bars, you don't want to tighten down the bolts all the way just yet, because we're going to need to install a wire onto each of these in a second. And right here, we don't need a bus bar because this is where the safety switch wires are going to attach and complete the circuit. But we do need to get this last bus bar in right here. Good. And with all those bus bars installed, now we could come around to the other side and install these. Now, both of these ends don't get bus bars because they get the orange wires when we're done. So just connect the bus bars to all the other batteries like so. So with all the bus bars loose but installed, the reason why we kept them loose is because we need to install our voltage acquisition wires, which are these right here. They connect to each of these bus bars. That way, the computer will know if the battery's depleted, if it's fully charged, if any of these cells are bad, and stuff like that. So this wiring harness plugs right into the computer down at that orange plug. So let's unbundle it and get the harness in the wire holder on the bottom, and then just press it into the computer until it clicks. Good. Now there are two main wires here, a shorter one and a longer one. The shorter one stays on this side, which is closer, and the longer one wraps around the other side of the battery. So for the voltage acquisition wire that we're running along the far side of the battery, we don't want to just run it like this because right here is a bad chafing point that over time could cause issues against this metal bracket. So make sure you run this wire through the white wire loom protector. Then we could tuck it right behind the computer right here and run it around the corner to the other side of the battery. Now, since we're working in this battery junction box area, grab the small orange wire that we removed before, and let's plug this in. There's two spots to plug in orange wires. The shorter wire goes here. They can't fit into the wrong one, so you can't mess this up. And then let's put it in this white wire holder, and this wire goes right to this first cell right here. Now, the other orange wire is still connected to our orange bus bars. We never disconnected it, so you can see it right down here. Just pry this off, and then this comes off like that, and then we could separate it, keep our wire here, and get this and send it back with the core. So let's connect this wire right here, and then we could run it right through this wire holder and close that up. Good. So with both of our orange wires connected, you can see the short one runs right to our first battery right there, and our long one runs all the way back to the last battery right there. So let's get this all wired up. So get your last acquisition wire on the bolt, and then bolt up the orange wire to the last battery like so. And we'll torque this down in a second. Same for the next wire. Get it on the bolt and snug it up. And notice how I'm holding the wire in a downward direction so it doesn't turn as I tighten. Keeping this pointed down will help keep everything nice and neat and organized. So tighten down one acquisition wire for each bus bar, and I'm putting them on the right side of the bus bar, but you could put them on either side. Just make sure you keep it consistent, and also make sure it's only one wire per bus bar. And finally, we have our last blue one right here that goes on the last orange wire. Good, and now we can torque each of these down to 54 inch-pounds. Then let's get the new bus bar covers that come with the kit and install them. But first, let's tuck the acquisition wire harness into the little channel under the bus bars so it's neat and organized. And the orange wire has its own channel right here as well that we could push it into. Then we could get the bus bar covers on, starting with the skinny one for the end here, and then the wider ones go on the rest of these. And they just snap into the battery like this. So get all the bus bar covers on, and check it out, this came out awesome. Everything is wired up, it's covered with the bus bar covers, and our wires are neat and organized. So we're done on this side. Let's flip over to the other side and finish wiring this battery up. So do the same thing on this side. Each wire end goes on one of the bus bars, and in this case, I'm using the left side. Just remember to keep it consistent. And now for the safety switch wiring, just grab this plastic cover and pop it off. And now the two wires line up to the batteries like this. So tighten down the orange wire to the right side, and then get that acquisition wire on the left side, and then tighten that one down as well. And that's all there is to wiring our safety switch, so now we're good to go here. And now we can torque down all the bus bar bolts to 54 inch-pounds. And then we can get the bus bar covers on each of these and just make sure they all snap in place. And just like that, we are done wiring in our brand new battery pack. Now all that's left is to install our temperature sensors, which go on the top. And then after that, we put the case on and get this battery back in the car and test it out. So our temperature sensors go on battery number 2, number 8, and number 13. And this is what a sensor looks like. There's a little spring here, so bend that inwards. That way when you push it on the battery, it snaps in place like that. Now get the other two sensors on. Good, and then you want to grab the white wire holders from your old temperature sensor harness, and these clip right onto the metal rail, and this will hold the sensor wires in place. That way it stays organized. So let's get the other two clips in place and run the wires through it so the wiring is neat and organized like that. Good, so now there's one last temperature sensor that needs to go all the way down in that hole there. So get it down there and push it in until it snaps in place. Now let's connect the white temperature sensor connector to the bottom spot on the computer, and then push the wiring harness into the holder up here. And then finally, let's connect the other connector we removed to make it easier to get to the bottom one. Good. Now our case could go back on, and then get your battery case baggie. That way we don't forget to tighten anything. And there are 4 nuts on this side that get torqued to 66 inch-pounds. And I picked up a spare safety fastener from the junkyard because mine was missing from the case. And that snaps right in there. So this side is done. Let's real quickly come around to the other side and tighten the other side down. Again, these 4 nuts get torqued to 66 inch-pounds. And with the cover bolted down, we are ready to install our brand new battery in our car. Real quick, I do want to mention, check your fan to make sure it isn't covered in dust. In this case, we have a filter. You guys saw we cleaned that filter. So we don't have any dust in here, but it's worth checking because if you don't have a filter and this gets clogged up, you're going to ruin your brand new battery because it won't cool down. And just so you get an idea of what a fan looks like that's clogged up, I grabbed this fan from a Prius in the junkyard that didn't have a filter. And check this out. You see how it's all clogged in there? That is pretty bad. So you need to make sure you clean that out. I mean, just look at this. This is crazy. And this right here is why your battery might overheat. Not good. It's also why a filter is pretty important. So you need to make sure you clean this out. Now, when you're cleaning this out, it's very important. Do not use compressed air where this spins, because if you let this fan spin, it will damage the motor. You also don't want to use water. You could actually do a core exchange with the company that sells this battery, and they'll send you out a cleaned one if you want. Or if you want, just hold the fan in place and then hit it with air to clean it out. Or use a vacuum, something like that. Just don't let it spin and don't get water in it. Okay, so let's carefully get our brand new, very heavy battery into the Prius, making sure we don't damage anything. And since I'm doing this myself, just walk the battery back and forth along the cardboard to get it in place. That way we could bolt it up. And then once in place, remove the cardboard pieces. Then we can line up the battery bolt hole, get some medium strength thread locker on the bolt, and hand tighten it into place. And do the same thing for the other bolt as well. So with those 2 bolts hand tightened, we have 2 more bolts in that corner and 2 more bolts in this corner. And remember, the shorter bolt goes into the back here where the rear seat bracket is, and the longer bolt goes into the other bolt hole, and just hand tighten these down. Now let's move over to the other side and get these 2 bolts in. Again, shorter bolt goes to the seat bracket, and just hand tighten both of these bolts down. Now we can tighten down all 6 of these bolts to 14 foot-pounds. So with everything torqued down, now we could go to the battery junction box, and we want to grab the wires that go to the inverter, and we'll attach these wires. Then we'll attach the wires down here, we'll get the lid on our junction box, and then we'll test this out. So remove the 2 nuts we threaded on here so we wouldn't lose them. Then we could get the inverter wires on the posts and get those nuts hand tightened on there and torque them down to 80 inch-pounds. Good. Now let's come down here and plug in these 3 connectors. So just push them in until you hear a nice click. Next, let's get the electronics cover back on and grab your baggie with all the fasteners for this. Now we can hand tighten all 5 of these nuts, securing the cover to the battery, and torque them all down to 66 inch-pounds. And finally, let's get the safety fastener in. And now we're done. Okay, so before we go any further and start installing interior pieces and vents and stuff like that, our battery is good to go. We have the cover on here, we have our safety fasteners in, we're safe to try this out. So let's get our safety plug in, and it just pushes in, then you close the lever and push it all the way to the side until it snaps in place. And one thing I want you to keep in mind, make sure that you actually push that in all the way so the unlock disappears, otherwise this won't work. So that needs to be closed like that. So with that safety plug in, I also connected the negative terminal on the battery. Let's go try this out. All right, moment of truth. Did we fix this car? So I have my foot on the brake. I'm gonna hit that start button, and when I do that, you're gonna hear two distinctive clicks. Those are the relays turning the battery on, and we should see no error messages up on the dashboard. So let's give it a try. Beautiful, the engine just started. There are no check engine lights or anything on the dash, which is good. And since the engine's running, you can see it's charging up the battery, which is great. So the engine just shut off on its own, meaning the battery is charged up enough for right now. So I'm gonna shut the engine, and we know everything is working, right? We didn't have any warning lights on the dash, so let's go install the rest of the interior. Now back at the battery, technically we don't have to remove this if we don't want, but I always like to be safe, so anytime I'm working around the battery, it's worth it. It takes 2 seconds to do. Pull it out and you're good to go. Now let's go get some of the vents installed and then get our side panel installed and we'll be done. So first get the wire harness clips pushed back into the battery like so. Then let's add that fan filter and vent and push that clip into the fan so it holds it in place. Then we could add our white cover and push it into this clip right here. And then push it down right here to snap it into the battery. Next, let's add this vent to the top of the battery. And finally, with all the vents and everything installed, now let's get our side panel installed. And if you remember, we did epoxy that plastic clip on the back here, so let's take our clamps off, and our clip is good to go. That's glued on there, so we can install this. So just push in at the top of the panel so it clicks in, and work your way around the panel, hitting it in place like so. And finally, we have our last baggie of fasteners for the interior. Now we have 4 fasteners holding this in. We have the silver tie down, we have the plastic piece, we have that black tie down, and then we have another silver tie down there. So let's get this first silver tie down in and snug it up. And then let's get this black tie down in. Then under the seatbelt, push that plastic clip in. And finally, let's get that last silver tie down snugged up. Beautiful, so with our side panel installed, now let's come around to the passenger side here and let's get our air vent cover installed. So get the vent in place like this and push downwards so it clicks in. So now we need to install this black 12mm bolt, but the problem's gonna be if we just put it in our socket like this, the angle we have to install it at, it could fall out. And remember, this bolt is buried deep behind the seat. If it falls out down here, it's gonna be a pain to get back. So a little trick is to get some black tape and just put it over the end of the socket like that. Just want to tape the end so it's pretty much closed off, and then you take your bolt and you push the bolt in as far as you could get it. Just like that. Now the bolt is in there good because the clearance is so tight. Then we could carefully get the bolt in the hole and tighten it down all the way. Perfect. So with our vent cover installed, now let's get this floor tray back on the battery. So get the floor tray lined up and push it down to make sure it's in place. And you just want to hit around the tray, that way all the clips snap in. So with this secure, don't forget there is a hidden bolt that we need to tighten down right about here. So get the bolt tightened down. Then let's get both seats back up and get the privacy cover back in. And we can't forget about the safety plug, so let's get this in. So that just pushes in, and make sure that you can't see that unlock text. Now snug up the negative battery cable and make sure it's tight. Then let's get this access cover back on and it just snaps into place. Then we have this plastic trim piece that gets pushed in, followed by this bucket in the corner here and its lid. Then the battery cover in the other corner, and then the big trunk storage tray, followed by our floor lid, and finally the trunk liner. And just like that, we are done. Let's go for a quick test drive and see what kind of fuel economy we get. Okay, so for the test drive, I'm taking a trip down to the beach, and I've been trying to maximize fuel economy, so I'm coasting to all the red lights and stop signs. I'm using my brake regen as much as possible. I'm going full electric mode as much as I can as well, and that's actually what I'm doing right now. This trip to the beach is a little over 20 miles with lots of elevation change. We have highway driving, we have city driving, so it's a good mixture to put this battery to the test. And this car is performing amazing. The ride is smooth, there's plenty of power. That slipping in the transmission that we felt, well, that's completely gone. Also, you remember when the engine shut off, it used to vibrate? Well, it doesn't do that anymore. it's nice and smooth. So the new battery fixed all those problems. And check this out, you're not gonna believe this. We got just under 70 miles a gallon for our trip to the beach, which is incredible. Now this is definitely not normal results, but typically expect to get between 40 and 50 miles a gallon for a Prius. Also, I just scanned the computer and we have no more trouble codes, so we have officially fixed this hybrid. Alright, and that's everything you need to know on how to replace a hybrid battery in a Generation 3 Prius. We got this car for $2,700. We spent $2,200 with the hybrid battery, which is brand new, and we put about $100 in hubcaps and cleaning supplies and stuff like that into the car. So for $5 grand, we have a car that's worth at least $3,000 or $4,000 more. We could easily get $8 grand for this if we find the right buyer, maybe even $9,000, and they'll have an amazing car that gets great fuel economy, it runs and drives great, and it looks spectacular. Just look at this car. So hopefully this video was helpful and you guys enjoyed it. If it was, remember to give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, consider hitting that subscribe button. And as always, all the tools and products I used in this video, including the battery pack, are linked down in the description so you can easily find them.